have to take a deep breath before I do this. You guys know at this point that I really, really don't like anatomy. It is the bane of my existence, but I'll just go ahead and keep teaching it because it's there. Now, today is actually, we're going through a practical lecture in anatomy today. Pretty much how you eat, that's important, how you breathe, and how you excrete. These are things you've all been doing your entire life. Since you were born, you've been doing these things. But we're going to go into sort of in-depth on how it occurs. Not as in-depth as a full-fledged anatomy course, but it'll get you the basic idea of how your lungs work and how your digestive system works. We're going to start off with gas exchange. You've got to respire. You've got to move gas in and out of your cells. Why is that important? What gas do you need to bring in? What? Oxygen. Why? Why is oxygen so very important? For respiration, cellular respiration. What is the point of oxygen in aerobic cellular respiration? It helps metabolize glucose, but what does the oxygen actually do? Oxygen oxidizes. Okay. It oxidizes. What does it mean to oxidize something? So it steals something. What does it steal? It steals electrons. All right. Where does it steal the electron from? Oh, now, okay. You're just, yes, you got chemistry. Specifically in cellular respiration. Okay, what's going on? There are 4 steps to aerobic cellular respiration. What are they? Any recall this at all? And recall anything about cellular respiration? You break down glucose, right? What's that process called? Glycolysis. Glucose gets broken down into pyruvate. You release some energy. Pyruvate then gets broken down in a process called, not coincidentally, the breakdown of pyruvate. It breaks down into a molecule called acetyl-CoA, or acetyl coenzyme A. That acetyl coenzyme A goes into a cycle. What's the cycle called? Citric acid cycle, otherwise known as the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle, which is what I tend to call it, is going to produce a whole bunch of NADH, a whole bunch of GTP, a whole bunch of FADH2. These are all termed energy intermediaries. They've got highly, highly energetic electrons. So far, so good? All right. Those energetic electrons can do work. Now here's we get to the part where you need oxygen. Those electrons get dumped off at the inner membrane of the mitochondria. And of course, this is why I'm talking about it, because it's all about the cell, and I really like talking about the cell. Not so much about lungs. They get dropped off at the inner membrane of the mitochondria. There's a series of transmembrane proteins that can do something. They can do work. They get the electron. The electron gets dropped off, and the work they do is they push hydrogen across the barrier. Is this starting to sound familiar? So that hydrogen gets pushed across a barrier. You've got all these twists and turns in here. Here's the other side of the barrier. You've got your Krebs cycle dropping off their electrons at these proteins. They push hydrogen across. Then it jumps to the next in sequence. That molecule's more electronegative. That protein's more electronegative, so that pushes hydrogen across again. It jumps. Well, apparently that's a big jump. Jumps again. Pushes hydrogen across. What are we building down here? What's that called? Starts with a G. Actually, it starts with an E, but it's 2 words. Really? Okay, let's play Hangman. So what's it called? We're building up a whole bunch of hydrogen or a whole bunch of anything on one side of a barrier, not the other. E, that's right. Okay, that's actually the very first letter, right? So E is the very, very first letter. The last letter's L. So it's 2 words. So hold on. What? That is correct. The electrochemical gradient. Well done. No, that's 2 words. Electrochemical is all 1 word. So it's an electrochemical gradient. Gradients can move through simple diffusion if they have a place to go through. The place they go through is this ATP synthase over here. As they go through, it spins the ATP synthase, and that converts ADP into ATP, usable cellular forms of energy. Okay, so then where's the oxygen come into play? This is the whole point of respiration, okay? This is it. This is the big final end-all, be-all. You need oxygen to be the final electron acceptor of the electron transport chain. And that converts oxygen into water. Without oxygen, you can't have this hydrogen gradient being formed. Without oxygen, you can't push that hydrogen through ATP synthase. Without oxygen, you don't get energy. So it is absolutely vital to get oxygen into your cells. And that, geez, we're still on the first slide. And that is the whole point of this lecture, to tell us how do we get oxygen into our cells. So we've been learning about all sorts of organisms this semester. We pulled apart a pig. You guys, we talked about lots and lots of animals. Today we're finally really delving into humans. Humans are our model organism because we are animals just like most others. We got to get oxygen into the cells so we can have cellular respiration. We also have to remove the waste product of cellular respiration. What's the waste product of cellular respiration? Carbon dioxide. We've got to get that out of our cells. Otherwise, it could build up to toxic levels. So broadly, what goes on is air comes in, goes from the atmosphere to your lungs. From your lungs, it goes to a carrier, and that carrier in this case is blood. The carrier pulls the oxygen to the cells. The cells undergo respiration. The high levels of carbon dioxide in the cells are going to be transferred to the carrier. The carrier goes back to the lung, and the lung exhales to the environment. Air is not nearly as safe as we want to think it is. I mean, people are always like, we have oxygen in the air. That's true. But we don't have pure oxygen in the air. If we had pure oxygen in the air, it'd be so flammable, if anybody had a spark, the entire atmosphere would go up. Air is composed of lots of different gases, oxygen being one. But it also is composed of a whole bunch of small particles, microscopic organisms, particulates that can harm your interior. This room probably has not been, it's been vacuumed, I'm sure, but it's not been shampooed. There's plenty of fungus all over the floors. You guys know, you eat in here. There's lots of food on the floor somewhere. It's breaking down into individual bits, and those bits are probably being eaten by fungus, and those fungus are giving off spores that you're breathing. You've looked in a beam of sunlight before, right? In that beam of sunlight, you see little floaty things. Those floaty things are everywhere, and you're breathing them. This is a sneeze. This is a sneeze captured in with a very high-speed camera. When you sneeze, you are aerosolizing particulates in your lungs. Those particulates can hang in the air for several, up to, I think it's like 15, 20 minutes, depending on how heavy they are. Literally, if you're walking down the hall and somebody sneezes or had sneezed like 5 minutes ago, you're walking through it and you're breathing it. I know, this sounds great, right? Sneezes and all of these microorganisms, these dust mites, heck, you've probably even swallowed bugs at some point in your life. All of those things are in the air, and all of those things potentially can get into your lungs. So you need to filter them out. And to do that, you have the nose. That's right, the nose. It's the body's first line of defense against particulates in the air. Typically, when you're breathing, you try to breathe in through your nose. A lot of times, for a lot of you, you have allergies and your nose is completely stuffed up. So you bypass your very first safety valve. The nose is really, really good at getting particles out of the air because it has nose hair. Nose hair traps all sorts of stuff. If you were to look up somebody's nose, and you know you've done it at some point because they were, I don't know, they were sitting like this. Anyways, you've looked up people's noses, you see nose hairs. These hairs are sort of crossing each other. That prevents large particles from getting up there. It prevents flies from going right up your nose. You get stuff, this was actually a former student of mine. I was like, I have to take a picture of what's up your nose right now. And he didn't blow his nose or anything. I was like, wow, that's great. Anyways, these hairs catch most large objects. Once you get past the hairs, you enter the nasal cavity. And the nasal cavity has lots of twists and turns. Now, typically, we think of twists and turns to increase surface area. And I guess it serves in the same point here, but even more important, this is acting like a maze. This is acting like a labyrinth. Those twists and turns are really good for catching any particle that gets past the nose hairs. Lining the cavity, you have a lot of mucus. Mucus is a bunch of lactic glycocalyx. It's a bunch of proteins and carbohydrates sort of congealed together. Now, that mucus is all through the sinus cavity. The cells that are producing the mucus are moving it backwards constantly using cilia. Remember, cilia are constantly waving. So as some particulate goes up, it gets embedded in the mucus, and the cilia start to move it. I want to take a moment here to just take a break and talk about this thing called a neti pot. You guys ever seen these? Anybody ever used them? Let's talk about neti pots. What are you doing with a neti pot? What you're doing is you are flushing out not just particulates, but mucus that's in there. You are directly applying water to your nasal cavity. Some people swear by it. They're like, this is the best thing ever. I tend to not swear by it because if you're not using absolutely pure distilled water, sterile water, you can run the risk of contracting an infection from this. Brain-eating amoeba, Naegleria fowleri, can thrive in just about any condition. The only thing it needs is to have access to your olfactory nerve in your nose. So what you're doing right here, if you go out, I don't know, you get it from a sink that happens to be infected, and it could, you're directly applying this amoeba to where it can drive to your brain and then kill you. If you ever get a chance, read about the biology of Naegleria fowleri, the brain-eating amoeba, and you will never go swimming again except in a pool. Just so you know. So yeah, I don't really go for the neti pot thing. All right, so back to the mucus. You got these cilia. Particulates get trapped in the mucus. They start getting pushed to the back of the throat. As that mucus builds up, it starts going down your throat. You've experienced that. You've probably experienced that an awful lot, especially when you're sick. Lots of drainage. It's going down your throat because at the bottom of your throat, you have your stomach. If you go one way, you've got your stomach. And that stomach is filled with all sorts of acids that can digest these materials. So the net result of taking in air through your nose is you're going to have purified air that's warmed up by going through all these twists and turns and moistened. It's wet. So that's what your nose is good for. We haven't even gotten into the smelling thing. That comes in the next lecture. So air is now gone through your nose and it's going to move down your trachea. There's more mucus in your trachea, so that's right here. You've got lots of mucus there, and that mucus traps things. You've probably swallowed something that's got caught in your throat, like a bug, and it sort of got trapped there, and you had to swallow hard to get it down. Cilia in your throat, the mucus and the cilia in your throat are going to trap any remaining particles that are coming in the air, and then sort of divert them down to your stomach. So far, so good? There's a flap of cartilage, the epiglottis, that opens and closes right at the back of your throat. Now, this sort of is the switch track point. From here, you can get materials to go down to your stomach, or you can get them to go over to your lungs. It's all based on where that flap of cartilage is. You cannot eat and drink at the I'm sorry, you can't eat and drink at the same time. You can't drink and breathe at the same time because of that flap of cartilage. If you try and force yourself to, of course you're going to choke. But that flap is there to prevent you constantly choking. So we get past the epiglottis and we get down to the lungs. The lungs are not muscles, they're tissue. They don't move on their own. They will increase their surface area. They will inflate. But the way they inflate is not through their own muscles, but through another set of muscles elsewhere in the body that will expand the rib cage and pull down on the diaphragm. That forces air into the lungs. That's called thoracic breathing. So we get these two large organs in your chest filling up with air. So this is the obligatory. This is a normal lung. That's a smoker's lung. Don't smoke. You're going to anyway at this point, so whatever. But there you go. But I'm not saying you're going to. I'm going to say those who are smoking already don't care. So here you can see the set of muscles I was talking about as the rib cage expands out. Take a deep breath. Go. As you do that, your rib cage expands. When you breathe out, your rib cage contracts. There are muscles, especially, like I said, this diaphragm here. If you remember the pig, you had to cut through that in order to open it up. Diaphragm down here, muscles along the chest. So once we get into the lungs, we enter into what are called the bronchi. Then from there, they go into what are called bronchioles. So bronchi big, bronchioles smaller. From the bronchioles, we go to the alveoli. Grapes. That's pretty much what they are. Grapes surrounded by capillaries. Pardon? Okay. Honestly, to me, they look like grapes or they look like blackberries. They're balls. So what will happen is the air comes in and starts to fill those balls. Those balls, they have that round shape in order to maximize the amount of surface area exposed. Then the alveoli are surrounded by capillaries. They're surrounded by little tiny, tiny veins of blood. So that's going to help diffuse gases via diffusion. Now here's an absolutely crucial concept. It's all about diffusion. I know, it's like you have to remember these 101 things. With diffusion, what's going on? What's happening in diffusion? It's going across a membrane from where to where? That's right, it's going from a high concentration to a low concentration. Right now, in the lungs, when you take a deep breath, you're going to have a high concentration of oxygen in the lungs. The cells have a low concentration of oxygen. So if we were to have, here's our alveoli, it's filled with oxygen, high oxygen. Here are the blood cells going by, they have low oxygen. The oxygen will go into the cells. And remember, gases will diffuse readily through the membranes. Small particles can go right through like those membranes aren't even there. The blood cells have a high concentration of carbon dioxide, another gas. The lungs have a low concentration. So the carbon dioxide will diffuse into the lung. So every time you take a breath in, You're filling up with a high concentration of oxygen. That oxygen will diffuse to the blood. Meanwhile, the blood is dropping off a whole bunch of carbon dioxide to the lungs. It's all about diffusion. So this blood acts as a carrier. That blood is a mixture of plasma and various types of cells. So sort of an aqueous environment. The red blood cells are the ones who are doing a lot of the carrying work. They're unnucleated. What does it mean to be unnucleated? There's no nucleus. If they don't have a nucleus, they're not really making terribly many proteins. They're relying on other cells to produce the proteins for them. But the protein that they are very, very high in is one called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is an oxygen carrier. It's great at it. It's its whole job. It's got this sort of like basket shape here. That basket will hold, I think it holds 4 oxygen in it. So they've got this great form. They've got a little basket inside of them to carry oxygen. They carry that oxygen from the lungs out into the cells. But we've got to get to the cells somehow. Your body is a series of tubes, effectively. It's got a bunch of highways and byways. And in those tubes flows blood. You produce about 2 million blood cells per second. So when you go and give blood, it's okay, you're making more. The blood cells are made not through mitosis of blood cells, they're made in the bone marrow. Which is why if you were to have your bone marrow destroyed, it's such a big problem. Patients who are undergoing various forms of radiation therapy or chemotherapy often will end up losing their bone marrow, which means it makes it much, much harder for them to produce blood. That's why they need oftentimes bone marrow transplants, so they can turn around and start producing more blood again. Now, each blood cell lasts about 120 days. That's its lifespan. It can survive 120 days doing a great job, and then it really wears down. And when it wears down, it gets recycled by the spleen. So you got to get the blood from one place to another. The way you do that is through these large tubes in your body known as arteries, if they're moving from the lungs or away from the lungs, or veins if they're moving back toward the lungs. Yes? Anatomy, it's magic. I have no idea. I'm sorry. I'll look it up and I'll find an answer for you. But so between the arteries and the veins, you're going to have capillaries. Capillaries are very, very thin nets. They're going to deliver blood to the cells. So here you've got an artery. Here we've got a vein. Between them are capillaries. In between the capillaries, you're going to have clusters of cells. So blood's moving here. It's got lots of oxygen on this side. As the oxygen begins to move through the capillaries, it slows down. And as it slows down, there's a lot of diffusion happening around it. Now, they've been diffusing oxygen the whole time they're in that artery. But really, when they get to the capillaries, everything slows down a lot, which means that they have more time to directly transfer oxygen to the cells. At the same time, the cells that are between these capillaries are handing off their carbon dioxide to the cell, their waste. The way I think about it is like a backup. So traffic isn't terribly bad around here. I know some of you may think it is, but it's really not. But you have to admit that it gets pretty bad at a construction site where everything moves from suddenly being 3 lanes down to 1 lane, and people don't know how to do it, and you yell at them a lot. Because what's happening is you're slowing down. You're going from this very thick tube, like the artery, this very wide, large area for transit to a very narrow one. So as you go through that narrow area, everything slows down. That would be like the capillaries. But what happens once you move beyond the slowdown? Once it opens back up, it moves really fast. That would be like hitting the veins again to head back toward the lungs. Now, these blood cells don't move all on their own. They have to have a pump. And I'm surprised at how many people don't know this, but that big pump is the heart. The heart is good for pumping blood. This is a valentine, not to be confused with a heart. There are again, welcome to college. Lots of people think the heart looks like this. There's a legend that says that, pardon? Yes, they do. But there's a legend that goes into the reason that a valentine is that shape is because it's like taking two hearts and putting them together. But that would mean somebody literally ripped out two people's hearts and put them next to each other. And that's kind of messed up. Maybe they're already dead and they just ripped in, pulled out their hearts. And this is not like Temple of Doom or anything. So there we go. The heart pumps. You felt it before. You're getting ready to take an exam, and suddenly the heart starts to beat faster. We'll get into why in the next lecture. Now, the heart's divided into two halves, which are then each subdivided into two chambers. So half and half, right? Subdivided into a chamber and another chamber. Now, I'm going to point this out, and I will never ask you a question about this ever, 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 ever. There is a left side and a right side to the heart. Thanks. So, when you're looking at it, you want to say, this is the left side and this is the right side. What? Why is that incorrect? Right, because you're looking at somebody else's heart this way. So you have to imagine it like this, which would make it the left, it reverses the sides. So that really only comes into play if you're dissecting someone. Or it's operating on them, I guess. That would be another time it might come into play. Look, I do dissections, not surgeries. Every time I do a surgery, it turns into a dissection. It hasn't been on people. We'll talk later. So there are two chambers of the heart, the atrium and the ventricle. The atrium is where blood enters. The ventricle is where blood is pushed out. The way I remember that is you guys have an atrium in your house. That's usually that front area where the door is. In case you didn't know, that's literally called the atrium. Just like all the other rooms have names, so does that one. By chance, what do you guys call that room? Where that front area where you open the door and the entrance? Okay, I'm just curious. The atrium? The atrium. Sorry. No, it's not a mansion. Trust me, it's not a mansion. It's literally big enough to open the door and take my shoes off. But it's still the atrium. But I guess you could call the atrium the entrance to the heart. They both have a T and an R in it. Oh, so does ventricle, though. Oh, well. Good luck with that. That blood flows, yes. But aside from that. No, what I really care about is big picture. It's all about moving the gases. How are gases exchanged? So the right side of the heart pumps blood carrying waste to the lungs. The left side of the heart pumps blood carrying oxygen to the cells. As you're going through the body, you're going to go through, the blood cell makes one complete circuit of the body. It goes through the heart twice. Typically, they're going to make a complete circuit of the whole body in about a minute. So one blood cell goes from the heart to the lungs, from the lungs to the heart, out to the cells, back to the lungs. Lungs to the heart. No, back to the heart, then to the lungs. About a minute to do that. Now, you guys are heterotrophs. That means you have to take in nutrients from the environment. You cannot produce your own organic molecules. You need to get food from things that can make, you need to get nutrients from those organisms that can make organic molecules. What are those organisms that can make organic molecules from non-organic sources called? Autotrophs. Give me an example. Plants. Plants are specifically photoautotrophic. Here's the deal. We can eat plants, but we don't have to. Well, yeah, you need some. But we can eat other things. We can eat other heterotrophs. We can eat derived nutrients from them because they ate the autotroph. We are heterotrophic. We need to eat one way or the other. So we begin our discussion of eating with the mouth. The mouth is a specially adapted entrance to your endoderm. It gets you from the external environment to the internal environment. Remember, we've got those 3 cell layers, the endoderm, the mesoderm, and the ectoderm. This tube starting at your mouth is going to be the endoderm. Right inside your mouth, in case you never knew, you have teeth. That's what we hope, you know. Your jaws are filled with very, very specialized teeth because you're a mammal. And those teeth are going to be good for tearing flesh, grinding vegetation, whatever you need. We sit sort of at the, actually, we do sit at the top of the food chain right now. We can eat just about anything else because we're awesome. You've got incisors. What do you use your incisors? Your incisors are these front 2 teeth. What do you use those for? No, well, grinding. If you're really, really in a bad shape. If you were to take a carrot, where's the first? Do you put the carrot in the back of the mouth or the front? You break it, and so that's what those incisors are for. They're good for slicing. Then what do you do after you? If you've ever eaten a carrot, what do you do with the carrot after you've sliced it? Where does it go? To the molars. It goes to the back, and that's where we start grinding it down. When you're eating a steak, first thing you take a bite, where do you put the meat? Where does it always go first, usually? Yeah, it starts out in the front. You sort of like take a bite of it, and then as you chew, you can move it farther and farther back. So I don't know about you guys. Actually, now that I think about it, I didn't eat this morning. I brought food. But I didn't eat this morning, and now that I think about it, I would like pork chops for dinner. You've had pork chops, I assume? Now, in my bachelor life, before I got married, I ate a lot of pork chops because pork chops came in packs of 20. So I'd just buy a pack of pork chops and a big thing of mushrooms, and I would wrap them individually and cook them. Now, I was not big on plates because plates need to be washed eventually. So instead, I would eat over the sink. And also, I wasn't big on utensils because utensils need to be washed. And people were like, get plastic ones. I was really, really not well off for money at that point. So plastic cost money. So I had pork chops that I ate over a sink, and the only way I could eat them was I, cook it, take it, I did have to clean the pan eventually after a few days. Why didn't I eat off the plan? It's right. So you grab the pork chop, you eat over the sink, because there's a garbage disposal in the sink. But when I did that, I had to bite down and then pull. Have you had to do that before? Have you been in this situation? Okay, good. Whew, not just me. Not that specific situation. You bite and you pull because you have to rip. And that's where it's not the incisors, but it's the canines that come into play. Now, not only do you have teeth in your mouth, you also have these jaw muscles. And you've got jaw bones that are going to help move that food around your mouth because you're constantly moving food. We did that experiment in here where you guys touch different parts of your tongue with different things. You are constantly moving food around your tongue in order to hit all those chemoreceptors and to make your tongue form them into these special shapes. Your tongue is really good at stuff. It's really powerful. Your tongue is probably one of the most well-used and precise muscles in your body. Now, I was just talking about my experience with pork chops. Here's my other experiences. I'm lazy, and I am lazy to the point where I don't like to chew. If I could have my food in liquid form, I would absolutely do that 100% of the time. Like, no doubt, I would love that. I could live off of smoothies, but I don't. My favorite time of year is coming up. It's Thanksgiving. And the reason I love Thanksgiving so much is because you take turkey, and I rip my turkey apart into little bitty turkey bits. I don't know if you guys do some, and okay, don't even worry about it. You're not like me at all. But I take my turkey and I like cut into little pieces first, and then I combine it with the mashed potatoes, and then I combine that with the gravy. And if there's, I don't know, if there's some sort of vegetable, there's usually not a vegetable because who am I kidding? I wouldn't eat it. But this mashed potato, turkey, gravy slur, that's the best to me. Because I don't have to freaking chew. It's great. Okay. Someday, when you guys if you ever have a kid, you will go through this point in your life where you pull out that baby food and you have to show the kid how to eat the baby food, and you're like, oh yeah, this is good, right? And then you will realize they eat so much better than we do. They get, like, their pears are brilliant. The best, thanks. No, the best pureed food you will ever have comes in those baby cans. Don't eat the, like, chicken and stars, though. That's terrible. But the, I thought to myself, it's like Thanksgiving, but it's not. It's not. But, like, the applesauce, the pear sauce, you don't have to chew. They've got so much going on for them. Crazy expensive, but so much. Some animals don't chew. I try not to chew. Butterflies never chew. Butterflies just sip. They're delicate that way. So when you start to eat, when you start to think about food, you get saliva to start to be produced. This is filled with enzymes, and that begins to coat your food. It coats it with liquid, and you've got mucus in your mouth. It coats it with that. You'll notice that even if you take something really dry and you put it in your mouth, it starts to get wet. This starts the process of digestion. You start to break things down. Your body produces about 1.5 liters of saliva a day. 1.5 liters of that stuff that drips in your mouth. That's, for reference, about a bottle of wine worth of saliva. Or, okay, I'm not sure if you guys recognize this. About 3 years ago, overnight in the grocery store, they switched from 2-liter bottles to 1.5-liter bottles and charged the same amount for them. Did you guys notice that? Oh, it ticked me off. So the modern soda bottle is about 1.5 liters, even though it still costs the same. Where did I obtain that research? I went to Food Lion. Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I think it's probably what they did was they measured it in other organisms and scaled it up for humans. But yeah, I would not be surprised if on a college campus somewhere. College students, by the way, are some of the most likely to volunteer for random research because their professors are doing the research. The students want to get and go with the professor, and there's usually like a $5 stipend. And they're like, I can get Starbucks now.
There's like flyers everywhere on YouTube.
Yeah, so
And it's just like taking over a life,
this is not going to work out. I've seen that movie. All right, so in your mouth, not only do you have teeth, you've also got a tongue. And that tongue moves food around, and it forms it into saliva-coated balls called a bolus. In fact, all right, so this is what this is the audience interactive part. Anybody in here allergic to peanuts? No. Deathly or badly? Deathly. Okay, fine. Can you eat a Tootsie Roll? And I have cookies. Well, okay, and I will say, Steph made these, and I've been, like, eating them. But now I want you guys to eat them. So this is going to work out. Try some. No, yeah, come on. Yeah, no. You want a Tootsie Roll? Yeah. Yeah, of course. Don't. Crow, wake up. I'm giving you a cookie. I'm giving you a cookie. Awesome.
Y'all can't judge my bacon skills off of this. Just saying.
Don't put it in your mouth yet. I've got to talk you through it. I've got to talk. It's not just eat it. Oh. All right. There you go. Have one. Got it. Wait. I'm getting up to you. No, you got to eat. Do you have anything to eat?
Do I have to?
You have to. This is audience-y.
This is weird. Wow.
Way to go. I'll just take two. Some of them are like clumps.
Well, just pop it and give Steph one. There you go. Got it? Got it. And pass the small one over to Will. Got it? All right. Good. We just have just enough. Here you go. Can you have a Tootsie Roll? Yeah, they're totally vegan. They're totally. That's okay. I just need you to put it in your mouth.
Is this one?
Yeah, hand him the other piece. All right, so now everybody's got something, right? Here's what I want you to do. Take a bite of it and feel where it goes in the mouth. Feel what your tongue naturally does, because we never think about what our mouth is doing when we do it. For me, I push it to the back of my mouth first. Right to the side. But then you'll notice it automatically starts getting covered in saliva. It gets really wet really fast. Your tongue then starts shifting it over. Now, part of it gets coated right across the tongue. You can feel where it's gone, right? If it was a heavier, maybe, I don't know, peanut butter crackery thing, it would form a bolus, a ball. It's okay. These things happen. I never thought to ask before, so I might have killed some other student. It happens. That peanut butter M&M, what was it, the Reese's Pieces M&M thing just wouldn't work out in this class, or most. So you chew it, you start to form this bolus, and then that bolus goes down your throat. That's what I really wanted you guys to see. Take a minute and feel how food moves in your mouth. It's weird, isn't it? You never really think about it. Next time you're eating something really heavy, like a steak or a potato or something like that, feel how it moves in your mouth, how you're... Shoot, now I'm really salivating. I got just half a cookie left. Thanks. We're getting to that later. All right, so once you swallow, that bolus has to move down your throat. And it's moved downward by a process called peristalsis. You swallow it, and muscles move it down. It's being pushed down your throat. So what's happening is you have contracting muscles. You can start at the bolus at the top. One set of muscles squeezes, and it pushes it down. If you've ever tried to squeeze something through a tube, it's the same idea. You're squeezing on behind it, and then the front of it's opening up. So squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. This is not moving down your throat due to gravity. It's all muscle contractions. What? No problem. Yeah. Had to wake you up for that one. So hold on. So I'm going to demonstrate this. I'm hopefully not going to die in the process. If I fall over or start choking, somebody help me, okay? Thanks. Extra credit. Extra credit if you save my life. All right. All right. Now I'm chewing up the cookie. And as I swallow, it's able to go to my stomach. Thanks. It's all due to the peristalsis. You got muscle contractions pushing downward. And I put that there to put my head on, and I missed it. Pardon? Eventually. No, I have not digested it yet. That's what we're moving into. It's going to take me like 24 hours, 36 hours to do that.
I don't believe that. Everybody always says that, and I don't believe it takes that long.
That's nice. That's
Everybody truly think it takes 24 to 36 hours. Okay. I don't feel that. Maybe TMI, but I don't feel
No, it's cool, it's cool. Tell you what. Thanksgiving's coming up. Do you have corn at Thanksgiving? Time it. No. So, once you swallow, you've got this flap in the back of your throat called a uvula. This is one of the best words ever, the uvula. That uvula, when you're swallowing, folds upwards. And what it does is it prevents food and liquids from going up into your nasal cavity. That uvula is pierced because some people are stupid. What's the fun in that? What's the point? How do they do that? You put a. It's almost like removing a hook from a fish's mouth. You just stick it in there. It's the reverse of that, I guess, and staple. So this little flap will fold back upwards. If you've ever sprayed milk out of your nose or any sort of liquid, and you guys know that hurts sometimes, so everybody at some point's done this. The reason that happens is because as you're swallowing, you've moved that liquid past your uvula. And then, before it gets down to your stomach, before it's past the epiglottis, you're going to have an eruption of air coming out of your lungs. And that will push the liquid not just out your mouth, which is why you would spit, by the way, but out through your nose. My proudest moment was making somebody spit carrots out of their nose. I know. I don't remember what I did, but man, it must have been good because carrots came little bits of flecks, not like a whole carrot, just but they chewed it up first. How old was I? I don't know, like 28, 29. So, when you laugh really hard right after you swallow something, you might bypass that uvula, causing liquids to come right out of your nose. But if you get past the epiglottis, you're heading down toward the stomach. This is effectively a muscle-bound sac of acid that mixes up food. It's a storage tank. Food comes into the stomach where it's mixed with acids, and low pH digestive enzymes. So the food comes in, starts mixing. You've got that bolus filled with saliva, already pre-digesting some of the foods. They hit your stomach. At that point, you sort of denature the enzymes that were in the bolus, so they stop working. But other enzymes kick in, and you start to digest stuff. Your stomach begins to move around, and that moving acts like an agitation cycle of a washing machine. You guys, I don't know how you wash clothes or if you wash clothes, but typically, a lot of times when I do it, I throw in clothes, I turn on the water, I have soap in there, and I leave the top open, and it's doing an agitation cycle to begin with. That's my grace period of, oh God, I need to find the rest of the clothes that are dirty and throw it in there. That agitation exposes more surface area of the undigested food, which at this point is called chyme, C-H-Y-M-E, to enzymes. Your stomach fills up, and usually you guys eat a few large meals a day. Some people are better, and they'll take many small meals. But the stomach will act as a storage tank, so it'll stay full for a while, and then it will slowly release food to the next stage, and that prevents backups in your intestines. So you have a constant flow of material through your intestine instead of you eat and then one big dump into your intestines. At the top and at the bottom of the stomach are what are termed sphincters. So you have a sphincter at the top, sphincter at the bottom. They're going to open and close. They're muscles that will open and close in order to release or hold food in. Now, your stomach is a big line of defense for killing bacteria. You're going to eat, especially earlier before we had a lot of prepared foods, we would eat a lot of bacteria, a lot of pretty bad things for us. Our stomach is there as that line of defense to kill bacteria or kill viruses before passing that food on. If the bacteria get through the stomach, that's where you could find infection. The stomach lining is exposed to a lot of acid. It's constantly producing mucus, but even with a mucus layer, these cells wear out after about a week. So just about every week, every single cell in your stomach gets replaced. Now, if you have high stress or you have a lot of issues you're dealing with, oftentimes your stomach is going to either produce too much acid or it's not going to produce enough mucus. And that will lead to an ulceration or a hole forming in your stomach due to all that acid. Your stomach growls, and it often growls at the most inappropriate times. You know, usually in a very quiet room where there's a lot of people. During exams, it happens all the time. Stomachs will start growling. One reason that a stomach will growl is because just thinking about food will cause your stomach to start entering into a digestive cycle. It'll make it start contracting and expanding. It'll make those muscles start moving. And a lot of those, in order to start moving digestive fluids around. It's like running a washing machine when there are no clothes in it. Right. So those movements will cause a growling sound, and they'll also cause occasional stomach pains. That's like when you're really hungry, it feels like you're hungry. It's not just empty, you actually are in a little bit of pain because of it. You're uncomfortable. From the stomach, you go through the pyloric sphincter, you enter into the small intestines. The small intestines is where real digestion happens. That's where you're going to strip away all the nutrients. This is where you're pulling out the nutrients from the food. And you're going to turn all that food into this watery waste. Now, the small intestine is very, very thin. That's why it's called the small intestine. It's super thin, but it could be about 20 feet long. Because when in doubt, you've got lots of twists and turns for surface area. The very, very first part of the small intestine is called the duodenum. This is where bile from the liver and the gallbladder comes in to neutralize the acid in foods. Now, bile is going to be termed a buffer. What does a buffer do? Back from 101. How does a buffer work? Okay, wait. Yeah, well, a buffer will either lower or raise pH based on the specific buffer. What'd you say? You said neutralize pH. Because it says that on the slide. But how does it do it? It's all out the H pluses. So it can either absorb hydrogen or release hydrogen. It can do both. If it was an acid, it would just release hydrogen ions. If it was a base, it would absorb hydrogen ions. But it's a buffer, so it can do both in order to keep the system in balance. That's the first step. Because if you didn't do that, the chyme would be filled up with these with acid. And that acid would eventually eat through your intestines. And that would be bad. It would be like a scene out of Aliens. Lining the walls of the intestine are these little hair-like structures called villi. And on the very, very tips of the hairs, you're going to have these tiny, tiny, tiny fingers called microvilli. So here you see villi, and then on the very edges, you'll have little extensions called microvilli coming off. These serve to increase the surface area that the chyme touches as it goes by. Because the chyme has a very high concentration of nutrients. These cells have capillaries running through them, with blood cells going through, those blood cells have a low concentration of nutrients. So as the food passes, you get diffusion from the high concentration area to the low concentration area. Here's a model of the blood vessels moving through the villi. You've got blood coming up from the lungs, going through the villi, and then coming right back down to the veins. As it's moving this way, there are capillaries. It slows down, so nutrients can move from the chyme into the blood. That allows the blood cells to transfer the nutrients to other cells they pass through on their way through the body. And that's the heart of digestion right there. Now all we've got left is waste. We've taken all the nutrients out of it. So all that's left is this slurry, this sort of wet, indigestible food and dead cells. They head into the large intestine. Large intestine called such because it is very thick. The large intestine does not play a digestive role. There are no nutrients being taken out of the chyme at this point. There's no nutrients being absorbed by the tissues. The point of the large intestine is to reabsorb water. So from the small intestine, we were adding a lot of water. It's actually really interesting, because if you think about it, chyme itself doesn't have terribly much water in it. But it has a lot of nutrients, it has a lot of solute. So water from the cells of your intestines is going to flood into that area where there's less water. That's osmosis, just the movement of water. So now we need to get that water back. That's the point of the large intestine. And as we get the water back, it concentrates the waste. Living in your large intestine, you have a ton of bacteria. Those bacteria, the job of the bacteria is to break down undigestible food and give some of the nutrients back to the body. So it breaks down food a little bit more. You're not doing any digesting, but these guys can do it for you. This is in the large intestines where you really start to build up the smell that you would associate with feces. Because these bacteria are giving off gases. And those gases are not particularly good smelling. So as the bacteria break down food, those gases are being released. As it comes out, you get feces. And they typically have, you've seen feces before. You know colors of feces. Have you ever seen a baby's feces? They're ridiculously rainbow colored. Orange, greens, yellows, all sorts of stuff. Your feces is the color it is, and it's a fairly uniform color for the most part, I assume, not that I've checked behind you. It's going to be caused by breaking down bile, and that gives it that sort of greenish-brown color. For every pound of watery waste that comes into your large intestine, you only excrete half a pound of feces. And you'll notice that most of that's not water on a good day. Half of the weight of that feces is made up of dead bacterial cells, roughly half the weight. So you've gone from a pound coming in to a quarter of a pound coming out. You've done a lot of water reclamation. Now, you do need to get your feces out, and you get your feces out in the same way you got food in, through peristalsis. You're going to have muscle contractions in the large intestine, and those are going to push balls of this feces toward the anus. This will result in, your book says, typically 3 to 4 bowel movements a day. And some of you guys are thinking, I don't think so. It depends on what you've eaten and how long ago you ate it. Now, typically, it'll take 12 to 36 hours for food to make its way through your entire digestive system from start to finish, because it goes through all those twists and turns. If there's something bothering your stomach, usually it's not, bothering in your intestine, usually it's not caused by something you just ate. If there's something bothering your stomach, it's probably something you just ate. There's a difference between those two regions of your body. Like I mentioned earlier, if you really want to, you could probably time it by eating something that's very distinct. Probably not peanuts, but because if you eat something that's very distinct that you can see coming out in the feces, that's the way it is. That's why when, children or dogs swallow like rings or something like that, or coins, because they're dumb, you can recover those. It just takes time. It's not like next time they excrete, it's coming out. It's going to take time. There are, of course, ways to make this happen faster. There are all sorts of, not just laxatives, but diuretics that will force water into your intestines. They force calcium channels in your intestines to open up, which will push more water into the intestines and push everything through very quickly. Very watery waste. Because at that point, your body is not concerned with recovering liquids. So that's solid waste, but we also have liquid waste in the form of urine. Liquid waste is caused by an excess of amino acids, too many amino acids. And this is where those other organs come into play, like the liver. The liver's job is to monitor chemical levels in the blood. So it can store chemicals and it can release chemicals. And it is really good at doing this, except it cannot store amino acids, which means amino acids can build up in the blood. To root out the amino acids, we have kidneys. The kidneys are pretty good at breaking down amino acids, and they turn those amino acids into a waste product, and that waste product is called urea. Well, now we've got to get rid of urea because that will build up toxic waste products, toxic levels. So it's very, very acidic. It can cause a lot of cellular damage. So it's extracted from the cells and then it's strained of its water and it's highly concentrated into a very, very potent solution. So you're pulling out of the kidneys, pushing it down into the bladder. The bladder is this little balloon. It fills up, it deflates, it inflates. Urine will go from the kidneys down into the bladder. There's another sphincter there because when in doubt, add a sphincter. It's got this hinge, and that hinge prevents backflow. So as this fills up, that closes. So you can fill up your bladder and not back up into your kidneys. Now, you guys have all felt your bladder full. You've probably been in a class, and you're like, I don't want to get up, but I have to go now. And it feels like your bladder's huge, doesn't it? You always think it feels like it's taking up this huge portion of your body. Your bladder should be roughly the size of a golf ball, a bit bigger. But if it's damaged, if it's infected, it could get much, much larger and lead to serious life-threatening conditions. As the bladder begins to increase in size, as that balloon fills up, it starts to send signals to the brain, and that signal is release, let go, let go, let go. In adults, the release is voluntary, but not in children. They can't control it. So you have a voluntary muscle control of your bladder. You can make yourself pee or not on demand. Children, not so much. So when they've got to go, they have to go. If you ever see an adult running through a store with a kid, usually it's to get them to a restroom. So there we go. Do you guys have questions? Yeah. How are gases exchanged? And how are humans able to digest food? Those are pretty broad questions. You can guess those are going to be essay questions, yeah. Explain the process step by step. Usually when I ask people to explain how to digest food, they go through from the mouth down to the anus, and life is good, and they totally forget about your liquid waste. So make sure you don't forget liquid waste.